Hello, I'm the Blue Cartographer, and this video is the story of the city of Welch, West Virginia. We're going to start with the history of the real-world city of Welch before moving on to the in-game city of Welch, covering first the layout of the city, and then the history of the city within the Fallout universe. Real-world Welch lies at the confluence of Tug Fork and Elkhorn Creek. It was incorporated in 1893, but human settlement to the area goes back at least as far as the turn from BC to AD. The people of the Armstrong culture, something of a subset or related group to the people of the Hopewell culture, lived throughout what is today eastern Kentucky and western West Virginia. If you have watched some of my previous videos, you know that first, the Hopewell culture describes a set of tribes and peoples who occupied much of eastern North America approximately from 100 BC to 500 AD, and second, that these people were mound builders. These tribes were linked by a trade network that made it possible to find flint from Ohio all the way down in Texas. The people of the Armstrong culture are known to have cremated their dead and layered their burial mounds with alternating layers of cremains and soil, building larger and larger mounds over time. We know of the quality of their art thanks to artifacts left behind in the burial mounds, including mica effigies, carved stone smoking pipes, and yellow-orange glazed pottery. The peoples of the Armstrong culture are believed to have lived in the river valleys throughout the area, residing in small round huts and farming beans, squash, cereals, tubers, and bulbs. The Armstrong culture precipitated the Buck Garden culture around 500 AD, which eventually precipitated the Fort Ancient culture around 1000 to 1200 AD, both of which showed improvements technologically and culturally over time. Let's get to the time of recorded history, though. The more I study West Virginia, the more I realize that the territory was in many cases used as debt payments by the state of Virginia and the federal government. One method that the government settled on was to grant vast swaths of territory, in many cases unsurveyed territory, to veterans or to debt holders, or to sell the land for direct income. Much of this land was sold for as little as 3 cents an acre. I know 3 cents was worth more 226 years ago, but it can't be worth that much more. Anyway, it appears that around 1794, two men purchased 320,000 acres of land that contained much of the land of modern McDowell County, the county in which Welch is the seat. Robert Morris, wealthy landowner and signatory of the Declaration of Independence, bought these 320,000 acres, and with one more purchase in 1795, he owned practically all of modern McDowell County. At this time, though, McDowell County did not exist, nor did the state of West Virginia. Instead, this was part of Virginia. The map of early western Virginia shifted a lot, making it difficult to know which county McDowell was a part of, as McDowell was formed in 1858 as part of Tazewell County, which itself was formed from parts of 2 other counties in 1799. The earliest white settlers in the region that became McDowell County arrived in 1802. The first couple to arrive in Welch in particular were Moses and Clary Cartwright, who arrived in 1825. People continued to move into the area, and by 1858 there were 282 land-owning families in the area. The county was formed February 20th, 1858, and named for the late Virginia governor, James McDowell. Interestingly, to me at least, Governor McDowell was born in 1795, the same year that the land was consolidated under a single owner. In 1861, McDowell County actually voted in favor of secession, and then further refused to participate in the vote to secede from Virginia the following year. McDowell was then one of the 8 counties that played a part in the Virginia versus West Virginia case that came before the Supreme Court in 1871, a case that obviously ended with McDowell remaining part of West Virginia. Sometime in the mid to late 1880s, former Confederate Captain Isaiah Welch and 2 other men purchased the 165 acres upon which Welch now sits for $2,155.75. When a rail line reached the area in 1891, it began to grow more quickly. The seat of McDowell County was originally designated by the Virginia General Assembly to be Perryville, now English West Virginia, as it had the highest population at the time. After decades of property disputes and delays in construction of local county facilities in Perryville, the county held a new election and Welch was chosen as the county seat in 1892. The people of Perryville didn't care much for these results, and thus the archives had to be snuck out of town in the dead of night. The city of Welch was incorporated the following year. That's right, Welch was the county seat before the city actually even existed. The population draw for Welch and the surrounding region lay beneath it, in the form of the Pocahontas coal field. The first mine to draw from this field lies south of McDowell County, just over the state line in Pocahontas, Virginia, where Pocahontas Mine No. 1 opened in 1883. The coal mines in this area are thought to be some of the best in the world, with a very high energy content with cleaner emissions. Thanks to the Pocahontas coal field, McDowell County continued to be a major source of coal for both steel and electricity production in the United States until the 1990s. The coal field spawned many coal towns, including Coalwood, home to the Rocket Boys. The story of the Rocket Boys was told in the 1998 book Rocket Boys, which was later renamed October Sky, mirroring the 1999 movie dramatization of the story. And what I thought was a fun little bit of information, the movie was originally to be titled Rocket Boys, until the Universal Studios marketing department came to the conclusion that women over 30 wouldn't go to see a movie by that name. It was renamed October Sky, both an anagram of Rocket Boys and a reference to the October launch of Sputnik that served as a foundation point in the story. We're getting ahead of the rest of the story with that 100+ year jump though. The coalfields were such a draw to miners that they led to a high ethnic diversity in the population. This led McDowell County to have the highest percentage of blacks in any county in West Virginia. The first census after Welch was incorporated took place in 1900, at which time the population was counted as 442. The population rose fairly rapidly over the next 2 decades, rising 245% in time for the 1910 census and 111.9% to 3,232 for the 1920 census. The early 20th century was a tumultuous time in labor relations across the world, and especially in the coalfields of the United States. I'll likely go into more depth on the literal battles between coal miners and state militias in a future video covering Blair Mountain, but for now I think I have a brief enough story that took place in Welch to give you a glimpse. On August 1st, 1921, private detectives working for the Baldwin Felts Agency gunned down Matawan, West Virginia's police chief, Sid Hatfield, on the courthouse steps in Welch. Baldwin Felts was an organization that got its start hunting down train-robbing bandits until they ran out of targets and switched over to strike-breaking. The assassination was triggered by an event that took place in Matawan the previous year, the Battle of Matawan. Baldwin Felts detectives rode into town on May 19, 1920, spent the day evicting miner families from coal company housing, and after a dinner at the local hotel were confronted in the train station by Chief Hatfield. An argument led to a shootout between the miners and detectives, ending with the death of Matawan's mayor and 2 miners on one side, and 7 Baldwin Felts detectives including 2 Felt brothers on the other. The assassination on the courthouse steps the next year was payback by the last remaining Felt brother. As one final aside on this matter, Police Chief Sid Hatfield, the target of the assassination, was of the Hatfield family of the famous Hatfield-McCoy feud. In a positive bit of history, in 1928, Minnie Buckingham Harper of Welch became the first black female legislator in the United States when she was appointed to the West Virginia House of Delegates by the governor. The population of Welch continued to grow over the decades, rising to its peak for the 1950 census when 6,603 people called Welch in particular home. That same year, McDowell County reached its peak of 98,887. The region supplied the United States with coal that fueled many of its ships, electric plants, and steel works through both world wars. But as technology increased, fewer human workers were needed. As a sign of the declining economic prospects for Welch in the mid-20th century, McDowell County was referenced by John F. Kennedy when referring to the growing poverty despite record coal production. In 1961, residents of Welch became the first in the country to receive food stamps. The county and the city populations fell precipitously over the next decades as coal production mechanized further, leaving many workers jobless. A pretty much perfect analog for Welch and Appalachia in general in the 2070s of the Fallout universe. Eventually, the largest mining companies left the coal field, leading to further unemployment. By 2018, the estimated population for Welch is down to 1,715, with McDowell County down to 18,223. Recent history has not been kind to Welch and McDowell County. Floods in 2001 and 2002 are said to have nearly wiped out Welch. In 2006, the city and its police chief were subject to an ACLU wrongful death lawsuit when the aforementioned police chief prevented first responders from providing CPR to a gay man suffering cardiac arrest. In recent years, McDowell County has seen life expectancy slide downward in part due to sedentary lifestyle and smoking. The fact that the county also has high rates of drug-induced death likely doesn't help that statistic. Lastly, in terms of real-world history, in 2010, Federal Correctional Institute McDowell opened a short distance north of Welch. The 1,660-man prison provided some jobs to the area, but fewer than had been expected. Now then, on to in-game Welch. We have in Welch and Beckley a similar situation that we saw when we were looking at Grafton and Clarksburg. In the real world, Beckley is located about 35 miles northeast of Welch. In-game, the 2 cities are switched in orientation and are within visual distance of each other. Along with this, in-game Welch lies at the foot of Blair Mountain, while the real mountain lies approximately 50 miles northwest of Welch. Along with this, there's the obvious difference that real-world Welch lies in a set of river valleys, such that it was almost destroyed by flooding, while in-game Welch lies on a hillside. Beyond that, the city center of real-world Welch is home to a large number of brick-and-mortar structures that we don't find in-game. With most of the real-world to in-game comparisons done, let's look at the layout of in-game Welch. In the Fallout universe, the city lies on the northwest to southeast axis, surrounding McDowell Street with Elkhorn Street as the only named cross street. Incidentally, these appear to be 2 of the largest streets in the downtown area of real Welch, although their orientation is switched in the game. The city is home to 18 houses, an antique shop, an ice cream parlor, a pawn shop, a combination bakery, pharmacy, gas station, what I believe to be a grocery store known as Wabash, a post office, a small electrical workshop, and what I believe to be a church. Welch had rail service via the Welch train station that sits on the town's northern edge. Underground coal fires dot the area. Welch was a hard place to live even before Hornet Industrial blackened the skies of this part of Appalachia. Welch was in a state of absolute bedlam in the weeks before the bombs, and much of what we find here is about that time. But there are a few things that we can learn about life before that chaos. Although automation was wiping out human labor, there were still some jobs to be found for those who could work. Welch is surrounded by mining sites. Hornwright Industrial Rockhound looms over the town to the north, but it is only one of many mining sites near the city. North of the train station, there is something of a corduroy-type road built of scrap metal rather than logs, creating a path to get to work at any one of the sites up the mountainside. Following the path of the mountain, workers could stop into the coffee bar, today home to Merkel the cat. Hiking past the coffee bar, the workers would pass a small toxic pond at the foot of an elevator. Once they had ridden the elevator to the top, they would have had access to the Mount Blair train yard, the Rockhound, and abandoned mine shafts Lane and 6. Up the road to the east, you can find an open pit mine and abandoned mine shaft 1. While those mines I mentioned are prefixed with abandoned, with rare exception all mines in the ash heap carry that prefix, leading me to believe that these were not abandoned before the war. I believe I've confirmed this at least for abandoned mine shaft Lane, where protesters had been picketing not long before the war. Hornwright Industrial mother lode testing sites and ash forges also dot the area, but I don't believe they would have used local labor on either of these due to the sensitive nature of the former and the intentional polluting to make increased use of the latter. The workers of Welch were not particularly wealthy people, as evidenced by the items we can find in their homes and the small variety of shops they had to purchase from. The Duchess, a crime boss of sorts, appears to have played a role in their lives, provided needed chems and equipment for the miners to work, while employing at least one hired goon by the name of Butch to extract payment for his services from the miners and their families. The police appear to have been onto her operation by August of 2077 at the latest, but they seem to have missed their mark in taking her down. Job losses in the region continued as more and more workers were replaced with tech. Some believed that when Atomic Mining Services, or AMS, a new tech firm arrived in the region, some of these jobs might return. AMS used nuclear weapons in their mining process, drilling deep into the earth and detonating the bombs. In the process of this, they discovered ultracite, a radioactive glass-like material. AMS didn't understand exactly what ultracite was, but through testing they discovered its potential as an energy source. They believed they could potentially power the entire country with it. They operated numerous testing sites in Appalachia, detonating nuclear bombs and searching for ultracite. The closest of these facilities to Welch is a small testing site to the southeast where they performed 11 test detonations. Through a record of the 11th detonation, we know that not only did AMS not know precisely what ultracite was, they also didn't know precisely how to make it. The workers on the site believed the test had failed, and after drinking their sad champagne, aka whiskey, they abandoned the site. The fresh job losses were sure to have angered the people of Welch, who were losing more and more jobs to Hornwright's auto miners. Robots developed with the assistance of AMS. The chaos for Welch began on October 1st, 2077, when without warning tremors shook the area. The land rose and fell, breaking roads, pulling down cliff sides and the homes on them, knocking down power lines and breaking underground utility pipes. The cause of these tremors was a sudden eruption of a vein of ultracite, spreading all the way from the AMS testing site to Welch. AMS was determined to get control of this source of ultracite, and they began to evict people from Welch, starting with the Kaminsky family. Angry locals confronted the AMS agents and a gunfight ensued. Soon the entire town was in a full riot. Barricades went up, and everything with a mining company logo on it was trashed. Dozens of robots were smashed in town. As unrest spread beyond Welch, Governor Evans called in the National Guard. The rioting, out-of-work miners seized the Rockhound on Mount Blair and built roadblocks on the roads to Bromwell. As word of the chaos spread, reporters attempting to find the facts on what was going on there were turned away by AMS guards. Back in the AMS HQ in Watoga, the receptionist was ordered not to give any details on what was happening in Welch. The National Guard arrived and began to push rioters off mine property, reclaiming the Rockhound by October 12th. We don't find any National Guard equipment in Welch, unlike neighboring Beckley, despite Welch being the epicenter of the riots. This leads me to believe that they had crushed the resistance in town and moved on to other protests. I believe the cemetery here was filled by the strikers, burying their fallen companions with simple planks for markers. While the rioters were eventually removed from Welch, AMS seems to have been unable to capitalize on their absence. Though there are strikebreaker robots in town, I believe that these are property of Robco, contracted by Hornwright Industrial to pacify the town. I believe that AMS was halted in their aggression by the courts, thanks to the legal maneuvering of Hornwright Industrial. Not that Hornwright was on the side of the miners, but they were making sure that AMS took the blame for the chaos and damages fueled by their actions in Welch. A one-time resident of the city, the overseer of Vault 76, lived in Welch for a time before the war with her fiancé Evan. When she was offered a spot in Vault 76 without him, she left and went home to her late parents' house in Sutton. She was there eating breakfast on the morning of Saturday, October 23, 2077, when the siren started. She made her way to the vault, leaving her unfinished food on the table. Whether Welch was completely depopulated in the rioting and pacification, or whether only the rioters were removed, we don't know. But there was at least one couple in town for a time after the bombs. An unnamed man and his wife Laura occupied a home near the post office for a time. The husband was confined to a wheelchair, so his wife made supply runs alone. When Laura didn't return from a supply run, he began to keep a log. Over the next 3 weeks of solitude, he recorded his thoughts and hallucinations as he survived on nothing but whiskey. Eventually, he died, staring out the window, watching and waiting for his wife. It was years after the bombs that the responders finally arrived in the area. Sometime after the fall of Charleston with the Christmas flood of 2082, Melody Larkin and Maria Chavez got together in the Morgantown airport. It was there that they formulated the plan for the fire breathers, with one of the hosts for the elite group being reconnecting with the survivors in the ash heap, including the people of Beckley, Welch, and Bromwell. While I don't believe that there were any humans there, aside from mole miners, the responders eventually completed an outpost at the Welch range station, where a responder's protectron can still be found. One final note on in-game Welch, I believe we can tie the disappearance of Frank, the husband of Flatwoods resident Willie May, to the eruption of Ultracite there. Though she seems to have been fine to be rid of him, she notes that he worked in the mines, and around the time of the tremors, he never came home. Whether he died in a mine from the tremors, or if he fought alongside his miner brethren, we'll never really know. I want to note one final thing about Welch and McDowell County before ending this video. That is, in spite of the difficult 60 to 70 years they've been having, I have no doubt that better days are ahead. As high-speed internet connectivity expands, whether through fiber optic cables, satellite internet, or some other source, I believe that rural America is due for a resurgence in population. Though many people will always want to live in large cities, many others do so because their job requires it. I foresee a time when many companies have small offices with the majority of their workers telecommuting from anywhere they want. There will be companies without office space at all, with all interaction taking place in virtual space. As I've gotten the opportunity to study West Virginia over the past 6 months or so, I've come to admire the natural beauty of the state, and I know that places like Welch will someday host telecommuting workers working for companies across the US and beyond. That should do it for Welch, though. This has been the Resolute Cartographer. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more, hit the subscribe button. If you liked it, hit the like button. If you have any comments or questions, leave them for me and I'll try to get back to you. If you want to get notifications when I release these lore videos, follow me at Gaming with Maps on Twitter. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again next time.